You are now host, Prabhu. You're online now on YouTube.
Okay, Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Okay, I can share the music now.
So we are at the last kirtan in New York. We are live
I'm in a meeting now. Hare Krishna, Mother.
Hare Krishna. I'll be there in one moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, may please accept my respectful obeisances. God bless you, Prabhupada.
And Hare Krishna, I'm just going to get the video on.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. I
Hare
just have
Krishna.
to put a battery in my hearing aid. It just went out.
Okay.
How is
It's okay.
everybody?
I'm fine, Mother. So you're welcome. So if it's okay, can we start now? I can preach the Prabhupada and Jai Radhamad, then you can get
I wear
prepared.
hearing devices, and just as I logged on, the battery went out. So I'm just putting the new battery in so I can hear
Okay.
you. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Okay. But I'll play Srila Prabhupada Jarad Madhava so that we can start afterwards. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So I'll put the class the verse for the day up, then you can start.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So the class today, Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 16th text, 8th chapter, and the 16th verse. So, Mamam Stahiyatadastaryam. Mamastahiyatadastaryam. Mamam Stahiyatadastaryam. Sarastariyamaye.
So sorry, somebody was I've muted the person, so you can go ahead. Mother, you are muted. Please, kindly unmute yourself.
I didn't mute now. Can you hear now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Mamastahiyatadastaryam sarvastaryamaye chute yairamaya devya shriratiyavati hantiyasaha. So the word by word, and when I read the word by word in translation, did you hear that, or was that also muted?
Yeah, you were muted then. Muted.
Oh, okay, so ma, do not, mamstaha, think, he, certainly, itad, all these, ascharyam, wonderful, sarva, all, ascharyam, maye, in the all mysterious, achute, infallible, ya, one who, idam, this creation, mayaya, by his energy, devya, transcendental, Srijati creates, avati maintains, anti annihilates, aja unborn. Maybe other people could put the mute on.
Yeah.
No.
I kept muting, but guys keep on coming up again. Just waiting for
MC.
Please, I keep
So,
muting. Go ahead, Matthew.
so the translation, O Brahmana, do not think this to be especially wonderful in the activities of the mysterious and infallible personality of Godhead. By his own energy, he maintains and annihilates all material things, although he himself is unborn, and the purport by his divine grace. The activities of the Lord are always inconceivable to the tiny brain of the living entities. Nothing is impossible for the Supreme Lord, but all his actions are wonderful for us, and thus he is always beyond the range of our conceivable limits. The Lord is the all-powerful, all-perfect personality of Godhead. The Lord is 100% perfect, whereas others, namely Narayan, Brahma, Shiva, and the demigods and all other living beings, possess only different percentages of such perfection. No one is equal to or greater than him. He is unrivaled. So again, the translation. O Brahmanas, do not think this to be especially wonderful in the activities of the mysterious and infallible personality of Godhead. By his own transcendental energy, he maintains and annihilates all material things, although he himself is unborn. Om Magyantimirandasya Jananasakaya Chatum Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskatya Satarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So my grateful obeisances to all of you who are here and tuning in. And I hope that everybody is well by Krishna's mercy, the mercy of Guru and Gauranga. So in this amazing chapter on the Srimad Bhagavatam, of course, you can say all chapters are amazing because Krishna is amazing and everything Krishna presents is amazing. And the Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of Sri Krishna. Therefore, everything in the Bhagavatam is also amazing. And just something I wanted to share about this particular section of the Bhagavatam, which include the prayers of Queen Kunti, is that in 1967, at the end of this month, end of May, when Prabhupada had suffered a stroke at a time where there was no doctors really available, and the devotees had taken him to a hospital. The hospital's name was Beth Israel Hospital, trying to discover and understand what had occurred and how to best treat him. And during that time, when it seemed, would he depart? Would he stay? Nobody knew what was going to happen. And Srila Prabhupada requested Brahmananda Prabhu to just read to him these beautiful prayers of Queen Kunti from this chapter. And in a couple of verses, you will start the beginning of her beautiful prayers. So he asked Brahmananda, that was the medicine he wanted to take, was to hear these beautiful prayers of Queen Kunti. And Brahmananda was recalling how at that point in 67, we were not so familiar with Sanskrit, which means when chanting the Sanskrit, it would be very imperfect. But Prabhupada didn't care for that. He wanted perfection or not, he wanted to hear the Sanskrit. And even though certainly Brahmananda said his chanting was imperfect, Prabhupada wanted to hear anyway. And sometimes we forget that when Prabhupada wrote the Bhagavatam or translated it, put his purports, he included the original Sanskrit, he included the word-by-word transliteration, as well as the translation and purports. So every part of it is very important. He took the time to include it. So therefore, we also take the time to read it each day as we go through the class of the day. And also in this particular chapter, we were hearing how, getting some insight, how it was a custom in society, the Hindu society, to go to the Ganges or any other sacred river to take bath when there was a death in the family, that each family member would pour a pot full of Ganga water for the departed soul and walk in a procession. And it was mentioned how the ladies were walking in front. And the Ganges water is particularly sanctified due to being mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. And even today, this custom of bringing the body of departed ones to the Ganges, it's very much practiced. Depending on your means, if you have the means to purchase the wood for cremation, then the body would be cremated on the bank of the Ganges. But if you didn't have those means, then the body just would be put in the earth or the sand of the Ganges and covered up with some cloth and some flowers, usually marigolds. And sometimes they will put the flowers in a very nice arrangement over the earth that is covering the dead body. And it happened to be when I was reading about this in the Bhagavatam yesterday, then I also saw a news article about India related to, of course, everybody understands there's this pandemic, this virus, which is affecting everyone, particularly in India, with an just immense amount of people are leaving their bodies. So normally, maybe you could say in 1 week, there would be 25 or 30 bodies will come to the Ganges. They might be cremated, they may be buried, but now they're finding hundreds. And it's very interesting because in spite of all the chaos, they're very careful when they come, very respectful to bring their relatives or loved ones to the bank of the Ganges. And now, because of the amount of death, it is very difficult to get wood. So more and more people are just being buried in a shallow grave in the sand by the Ganges. And still the people are being, so called to the Ganges because of the sanctity of this holy river. And the first time I went to the Ganges, I saw all of this. I was in Benares, and I saw all of this happening like that. That even though it's a solemn occasion, one still to take the care to make sure one's loved ones are properly addressed at this final moment in life. So the stringent laws of nature is under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they can't be altered by any living entity. And where we understand birth, death, disease, and old age, it's like a secondary mantra to us, And these laws of nature are there in all instances when one is not fully surrendered and taken to the shelter of the Supreme Lord. The living entities are always they're internally under the subjugation of the mighty Lord, who is making all the laws and the orders. And above these laws and these laws and orders are generally called dharma, or religion. And they're not man-made. This is not some, people sat down and said, hey, maybe we can improve on this. You can never improve upon the orders and laws of the Supreme Lord. And no ordinary living entity can create an authentic, bona fide religious formula. A bona fide religion means to abide by the orders of the Lord. And the Lord's orders are clearly declared and defined in the Bhagavad Gita, that everyone should follow him or his orders. And only that will actually make all of us, everyone, happy, both materially and spiritually. So long as we are in this material world, our duty is to follow the orders of the Lord. That is our primary duty. And if by the grace of the Lord we're liberated from the clutches of the material world, meaning we become fully cognizant of the Supreme Lord and our relationship with him, that means we're liberated. Then in our liberated stage also, we continue to render transcendental loving service unto the Lord with great ecstasy. But under the influence of the illusory energy, we're taking this, which Prabhupada described as a spot life, means just a brief flickering moment of life, only a few years really, as our permanent existence. And we become illusioned by possessing so-called country, home, land, children, wife, community, wealth, etc. We're thinking these things define who we are, but it's a false representation, and it's created by Maya, by illusion, the illusory energy of the Lord. And under the dictation of Maya, we fight with one another to protect these false possessions. But by cultivating spiritual knowledge, we can realize that we really have nothing to do with all this material paraphernalia and the so-called identifications we develop to it, the attachment which leads to misidentification. All of this is nothing to do with who and what we really are and our real purpose in life. And was one part that was very nice, that it was explaining that in the glorious days before the advent of Kali, of course, we all know that now we are members of the Kali Yuga, citizens of Kali Yuga. And so before the advent of Kali Yuga, the Brahmanas, the cows, the women and children and old men were all given proper protection. And by the protection of the Brahmanas, the institution of Varna and Ashram was maintained. And this Varna and Ashram are the most scientific culture for attaining spiritual life. And then the protection of cows, through the protection of cows, maintains the most miraculous form of food, milk. Milk, here's this big, large animal, the cow, eating some grass, and through that grass, this miracle food, milk, comes forth. And milk is for maintaining the higher tissues of the brain, for understanding higher aims of life. And nowadays, people are turning away from milk. They think that from a moral standpoint, because everything has become so industrialized, even the maintenance of cows is industrialized. And industrialized in the sense there's huge amounts of cows being kept jammed up in small spaces and fed in very tight confines only for the purpose of producing milk. And the milk is carefully measured each day, weighed. And when the milk production of a poor cow diminishes, then immediately off with her head and the cow is killed. Very terrible thing. And these industrial farms are just, they're the most terrible things to come across, knowing that these poor cows are going to be killed when the amount of milk they produce does not contribute to to the um, the material needs of maintaining cows as a business rather than maintaining cows for their protection. So people are turning away from cow's milk and taking other types of so-called milk made with almonds or oats or any other kind of nuts. But what happens is these other so-called forms of milk, they're not really milk, they're a beverage. And they will never replace cow's milk for maintaining the finer tissues of the brain. And from milk also, then we are able to make yogurt and ghee, and all of these things, milk, yogurt, ghee, are needed in terms of human maintenance and also for proper yajna. Yajna means for glorifying Vishnu, for glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if we don't offer him these things, then our yajnas are incomplete. They will never fructify as hoped. So cow protection is an extremely important aspect of our devotional life. And devotees should try their best whenever possible to maintain and protect cows. But of course, it's very difficult because actually cows are very big animals. They eat a lot, and we often don't have sufficient land for them. And then you have to grow a large amount of food to feed them. But still, it's our duty to offer protection to cows. And then the protection of women maintains the sanctity of society by which we get a good generation for peace and tranquility and progress in life. So if the women aren't protected, then naturally we have to go here and there, look, either try to protect ourselves or get led astray by people that, other people that exploit us. So the protection of women is a highly important aspect of proper devotional life. What to speak of the protection of children? Children gives the human form of life the best chance to prepare the way of liberty from material bondage. And the protection of children begins from the very day of begetting a child by the purificatory process known as Garbhodhan Samskara, the beginning of a pure life. And then these children should be protected and maintained in their younger years. In fact, Srila Prabhupada wrote to one God's sister who asked if she was serving Prabhupada. She was a mother as well as a wife, and she was also being requested to do some deity worship, which meant that she would have less time with her child. And Prabhupada was quite shocked that she would ask this. And not that she shouldn't do any other service on it, that was okay, but not at the cost of having, giving up service to her child. He didn't accept that. And he said, for you, child, this child worship is more important than deity worship. And he said, I'm surprised you would ask this question. Child worship is more important than deity worship. And then he told her, but if you cannot take care of your child, then bring him to me and I'll take care of him. He was so concerned. And then the protection of old men gives them a chance to prepare themselves for a better life after death. So who thinks about this? People are dying and then they're not able to remember Krishna because they've never been taught about Krishna. So Krishna consciousness is the most valuable commodity. And in these processes of protecting the different components of society, the whole point is to allow people to become fully conscious, fully Krishna conscious. And this complete outlook is based on factors leading to successful humanity as against the civilization, so-called civilization of Prabhupada describes polished cats and dogs. So these polished cats and dogs are humans, human body, but no connection with spirituality, no connection to the Supreme Lord. And the killing of above mentioned innocent creatures, cows, women, children, old men, is totally forbidden in Shastra, because even insulting them loses one's duration of life. And then there was a really nice point how the King of Heaven, Lord Indra, is thousands and thousands of times greater than Maharaj Yudhisthira in opulence. Yet the fame of Maharaj Yudhisthira was not less than the fame of Indra. And the reason for this was because Maharaj Yudhisthira was a pure devotee of the Lord. And it was by his grace only that King Yudhisthira is on the level of the King of Heaven, by the grace of the Lord. And even though Yudhisthira had performed only 3 yajnas, where the King of Heaven, Indra, he had performed hundreds of yajnas. But Maharaj Yudhisthira was actually greater because of being a devotee of the Lord. He was more glorified because he's always in touch with the Supreme Great, meaning Lord Krishna. And Prabhupada gives the example that sun rays are equally distributed, but still there are some places which are always dark. But that is not a defect of the sun, but to the receptive power, So sometimes those who are cent percent devotees of the Lord, similarly, those who are cent percent devotees of the Lord, they get the full-fledged mercy of the Lord, which is always distributed everywhere. So the Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely on him is especially looked after by the Lord. And Prabhupada's example is like the father is more attention to the smaller son because that smaller son is exclusively dependent on the father. So just like the Lord's devotees are more dependent on the Lord than non-devotees. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord clearly promised that his devotees will never be vanquished. And he behaves according to the quality or degree of devotion service rendered by the devotee. So the Pandavas were cent percent dependent on the protection of the Lord, even though they were great warriors themselves. And when the Lord saw there was no time for the Pandavas to counteract the Brahmastra of Ashwatthama, so this, we just read it a few verses ago how this Ashwatthama was so despicable personality. And he had a little knowledge how to throw a Brahmastra, but he didn't have the knowledge how to retract it. And he threw this Brahmastra toward an innocent pregnant woman, Uttara, who was carrying within her womb, and Uttara was widowed. She was the widowed of June, who was very young when he fought in the battle of Kurukshetra, and he lost his life there. So leaving behind Uttara with his progeny. So this arrow, this Brahmastra is coming right towards her womb because Ashwatthama wanted to kill that child in the womb, knowing that child in the womb would be a great king. And the Pandavas did not have time to counteract the Brahmastra. So the Lord, at the risk of breaking his own vow that he was not going to take part personally in the battle, still he took up the protection of Uttara. And according to his vow, he should not have taken the weapon up. But Prabhupada pointed out that the emergency was more important than the vow. And therefore he's known as Bhaktavatsala, the lover of his devotees. And he preferred to continue as Bhaktavatsala rather than be some worldly moralist who never breaks some solemn vow. This is Krishna, the protector of the devotees. And the Lord of Supreme Mysticism, Yogeshwara, who resides within every heart, within every atom, by his Paramatma feature, his plenary portion. So therefore, he was able to, within the body, enter within the body of Uttama, just like a small aspect of making himself smaller. And he covered the embryo of Maharaj Pariksit by his potency, and thus Maharaj Pariksit was saved. So this is something so amazing. And on the other hand, we are hearing that, what is so amazing about the Lord doing something like that or anything else? Because his energy is purely transcendental. And by this transcendental energy, he's maintaining and annihilating all material things. So then the verse says, don't think this to be especially wonderful in the activities of the mysterious and infallible personality of Godhead. In other words, the mysterious and infallible personality of Godhead, he does these incredible pastimes, these wonderful adventures, like becoming smaller than the smallest or expanding larger than the largest, like sucking the life out of the demon Putana when he was just a tiny baby, and she was becoming larger and larger. She came in the form of, a beautiful, nice, caring, loving, motherly figure, but her goal was to kill Krishna. And Krishna, even though he was a baby, he understood, because he's never not going to be God. He may have the form of a baby, but he's still God. And God is all knowing, all powerful. So when she offered the breast, he took it and he starts sucking out her very life. And she was expanding and expanding into this large, horrible form. It's described, I think she was like 8 miles in big, in largeness. And our Kitty is a little baby, and his mother put him under the cart where it was shady, and he kicked the entire cart over. And, so many wonderful pastimes. So why would it be so extraordinary that he could foil the Brahmastra and put it out of commission? In the Brahma Samhita, it's described the position of Krishna. He's everywhere. He's within the universe. He's within the atoms. Ekopiya Shorachi Utam Jagarananda Kotyam Yacha Yakchaktirasti Jagarananda Chayayaranta Andantarasta Paramano Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamahang Vajami. That this Brahma Samhita, and the Lord, by expansion of only one of his plenary portions, he's existing within this universe. And not only within this universe, but within the atom also. So this is God, this is Krishna's qualifications. He can become greater than the greatest, which means that nothing is impossible for him. Just like we have this conception of this universe, but still we can't imagine actually how far, how long, how high it is extended. And many such universes are coming out of the breathing of the Mahavishnu. From his breathing, he exhales, and innumerable universes are coming out. And then when he inhales, all those universes are again entering. Bhutva bhuta pralayate, Bhagavad Gita 8:19. So the Lord Krishna, he's greater than the greatest. And people say God is great. Every religion will say that. God is great. But without conception of just how great he is. He's so great that he can swallow innumerable universes within his belly and then exhale and they can all come out again. Just like when Krishna was challenged by his mother, show me your face, open your mouth, because your friends say you have eaten dirt and you say you have not eaten dirt. So I want to see, open your mouth. So then when he opened his mouth, Mother Yasoda saw within the mouth of her tiny son all the universes, all of the universes she was seeing. She was even seeing herself looking into the mouth of her son. And he proved, my dear mother, not only a little earth, but the whole universe is within my mouth. And Mother Yasoda was so astonished. She thought, okay, just don't do it again. That's all. Because it perplexed her so much. And she's looking into this extraordinary situation where her little child, like, I don't know who you are or what you are. And then she just shakes her, you are my son. I love you. So she doesn't know. Here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And to show me his mercies, become my child. No, she's not thinking like that, because if she's thinking, here's my son, how could she offer her, and here's my son and he's God, how could she offer her breast to God? So she's just thinking, here's my child. Here's my child. He's under my control. And this is not Maya. This is Yogamaya, where Yogamaya takes away the greatness of God so the devotee can have these loving exchanges. So that's the relationship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotees, is simply to understand God is great. It's not sufficient knowledge. It's there. But for the bhakta, for the devotee, when you deal with great and you exchange your relationship with the great, you establish your relationship with the great, that is perfection. And Prabhupada gives an example, suppose your president is very great. That's all right. Everybody knows president is very great. But what does that mean for us? What do we derive from that? So when I actually deal with him, maybe I become his friend, just like Srila Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. He became friends with the president of South Africa. So then you have a relationship, you have an exchange. Perhaps somebody becomes a servant in the government, so you become a secretary, something or other. So if I'm related to a great personality, that's to my benefit. There's a relationship, there can be an exchange. Otherwise, what's the use of knowing, president, he's so-and-so is very great. Actually, there's so many so-called great persons, and what am I deriving? So once the relationship is established with the greater of the greatest of the greatest, with Lord Krishna, this is Krishna consciousness. And the Mayavadi philosophers, they're just remaining silent. Oh, God is very great. But they can't even imagine just how great he is. But the devotees understand how great he is. And they can see, just like Jasoda saw innumerable universes within the mouth of the Lord. This is the position of God. He is great, he must be great, but we want to have an interaction with that great personality. And until you have that interaction, we cannot really understand what is God and how great he really is. So this Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hriday Tishe Arjuna Tishtad. God, God the Supreme Lord is everywhere, within and without. Ishvara, this Ishvara Sarvabhutanam, the Supreme Lord, is situated in everyone's heart. Of course, as the all-pervading super soul. And the real yoga means to see and find out that Lord, that Paramatma, to meditate upon him. So nowadays, yoga system is coming down to bodily exercises, keep health, keep good health, to reduce fat, increase sexual activity. That is the current concept of yoga, but Prabhupada said this is not yoga. This is bodily exercise. The real yoga is that God is within me, he's within you, he's within all of us, and within every living entity. Shwarasarabhutanam hirde deshi arjunatistati. Everywhere, within and without. He is invisible, alaksham antarabahi. Although he is within and without, I still cannot see him. So how do we deal with this? So meditation means concentrating the mind to find out God within the heart. That is real perfection of yoga. But people are not understanding this science. Just like Arjuna, he wanted to see, he's speaking with Krishna face to face. And he's beginning that realization, oh my God, my friend Krishna, he's God. Previous to that realization, he's just, Krishna was my dear friend. He remained his dear friend, but his dear friend was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Arjuna understood that. And then he asked his dear friend Krishna, I want to see that gigantic form of you. So Krishna agreed to show him. And Krishna produced that gigantic, huge form of the universe. It's described in the Bhagavatam. You've probably read that big, big mountains and hills are the bones of the gigantic form. For example, they're described like that. The highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, is the head, the skull. The rivers are the veins, the seas are the holes. And this way it's all described, this gigantic form. And this gigantic form, at the same time, is within our heart, but in a very small form. So he's within, he's without, and we have to purify our eyes to see him. That is the thing. So we can see God without and within, but not by the materially contaminated eyes, our materially contaminated senses. That stops us. This contamination of our eyes and senses stops us from knowing God, seeing God. But he can be perceived, he can be seen by these senses and eyes when they're purified. And that purificatory process is Krishna consciousness. And the more we purify, the more we see God, the more we can see God within and without. This Atash Krishna Namadina Bhavat Graham Indriya. This Indriya, the senses, this is Majulila Chaitanya Chitamrita. So the Indriya, the senses, they can't perceive, they can't see, they can't touch, they can't hear Namadi unless we're purified. Unless purified, you cannot also hear Krishna's name. So unless you're purified, the name is entering this ear, it goes out that ear. So therefore, the purificatory process is required. Godbrother was explaining how he's been chanting in the 16 rounds following the principles, and he was feeling that he's not getting sufficient ecstasy. And then he was realizing because I am still becoming purified. And I'm not chanting, although I'm chanting 16 rounds, they're not what Prabhupada described as 16 good rounds. It means offenseless, rounds without offense. So when you're chanting offenselessly, without offense, you develop a taste for the name. And then that taste for the name attracts you further and further to hear the holy name. And as we become deeper and more deeper in our chanting, then that holy name is dancing on our tongue, and within our heart, we are actually able to see the Supreme Lord. So this purificatory process is required. And when we're affected by the qualities, the three kinds of material qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, then we're being prevented. There's a blockage. So this purification removes this ignorance. It removes the passion, and even the mode of goodness has to be purified. But generally, people are more affected by the lower qualities, ignorance and passion, this raja and tama. And therefore, we can tell one person is in the mode of goodness, this person's in the mode of passion, this person's in the mode of ignorance. Like, how do we know that? And we know by the symptoms. When one is affected by the lower qualities, this raja, tama, passion, and ignorance, the symptoms are there that he is very greedy, very lusty. Those are the symptoms. And as soon as we find a person is lusty and greedy, then we understand he's under the control of the lower grade of the qualities of this material nature. And then the sattva gun means prakash, illumination. And when one is situated in goodness, that is a Brahminical qualification. Satya, samodamas, tiksha, this Brahminical qualification. Truthfulness, controlling the mind, controlling the senses, samadama, tiksha, tolerance, and ajavya, simple, simplicity. So then Titiksha Suchi, cleanse, Jnanam, he knows what is what. Vigyan, he can apply the knowledge. One thing is to know the knowledge, another thing is to apply this knowledge in practical life. So Jnanam Vigyanam Mastikyam. Mastikyam means to have firm faith in the Lord, to know that God is there, to know he's within, without. These are the symptoms of a person in the mode of goodness. So by these symptoms, we understand the three classes of men. And Krishna consciousness movement means to bring persons from these wretched low qualities, ignorance and passion, to bring them to the platform of goodness. That is our business. And to do this business, we have to also become purified. And that goodness also has to be purified. In the material world, the goodness also gets tinged by the lower qualities. So sometimes very big men, good men, but there's also defects. And we see that within others, within ourselves. So we have to come to this platform of pure goodness, the Brahminical position. When that goodness is the ordinary goodness is purified, then you have this sattvam vishuddham, pure goodness. And Prabhupada commented that it's not so cheap thing to understand God. When we're in the modes, or we're affected by the modes, the lower modes, not so cheap thing. And at the moment, at the present, most people are in the lower modes of material ignorance and passion. So we see practically all over the world this Rajatama Bhava Kama Lobha, every man is greedy and lusty, everyone. And so in this position, it's difficult. The quality can be changed. It's not that it's stereotyped, but we have to change these qualities by the process of Krishna consciousness. And that process is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. This mam chayo vya vicharena bhakti yogana sevate. One is engaged in my unalloyed service, this avyabi charena, no adulteration, pure devotional service, mam chayovi vicharena bhakti yogena sevate. One who is engaged in the service of the Lord in a pure unalloyed. So unalloyed means no motive. There's no other motive, completely zero. Like sometimes people, they go to the temple, the church, the mosque, generally there's some motive. Dear Lord, I need this, I want that. Prabhupada said, like in the Christian world, generally they're taking God as the order supplier, I pray to God, give me my daily bread. Give me this, give me that. There's a condition. I accept you, God, but there's a condition. And if God doesn't support my order, I don't care for this God. So this is the unfortunate mentality. They're not going to become servants of God. They want to make God their servant. Prabhupada was telling in Columbus, Ohio, he was addressing students, which was amazing. It was in 1969. So he said, so the Christians are saying, God, give us our daily bread. That's all right. God has given bread, but why are you bothering God? He's supplying food to millions and trillions of living entities. So why are you asking? He will supply. That's not our problem. God will supply our bread. He supplies without asking. Do animals go to church to ask for bread and they're getting? No. So why not as devotee? So when you make this demand, dear Lord, give me my daily bread, Prabhupada said, this is not love of God. This is love of bread. So Krishna consciousness doesn't mean that there's a motive to take it from God. We go to God, my dear Lord, please let me be your servant. We don't come with the hands out, please give me, give me. No, my dear Lord, please allow me to serve you. That is Krishna consciousness. The Gaudiya Vaishnava conception, perfectly exhibited by Yasoda Mai, worshiping her Lord, worshiping her child, not thinking, here is God. So she's always engaged, even though her child was God. She was always engaged in serving him so he would never feel inconvenience. He would always be comfortable. She was anxious. Krishna is now very naughty. He may not capture some monkey. I don't want him to fall down in the water. I don't want him to be burnt in the fire. Always anxious about Krishna. This is Krishna consciousness. Anxious to give protection to Krishna, the best service, although Krishna doesn't require anyone's service. He's complete within himself, Purnam, but for pleasing his devotee, he becomes dependent. He goes, Mother, I'm hungry. Why don't you give me food? I'll steal your butter. I'll take your stock. I'll take your yogurt. So this was the beautiful exchanges. When we become fully Krishna conscious, we have an active, loving relationship with the Supreme Lord, the greatest of the great, the smaller of the smallest, biggest of the biggest. Here is Krishna. All of that was within Krishna, and we have a relationship with him. So this philosophy, Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, is very sublime, to accept God as subordinate. Krishna says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that everyone worships me with awe and veneration. But if anybody worships me without awe and veneration and treats me as insignificant, I like that. Prabhupada said like that. Krishna is saying, I like that. I want to be treated as a friend, as a parent, push aside this awe and veneration. Otherwise, there's no loving exchange. Just like Janaki with Srila Prabhupada, there was no awe and veneration, just a loving exchange. She would even scold Srila Prabhupada. I think I've told you that, how he got locked out of his apartment due to one crazy lady pushing her way in. He came out to get help and the door shut, so he couldn't get back in. So he went to Mukund and Janaki's apartment for help because they had a key. And Janaki was chastising Swamiji, never leave your apartment without a key. She had that loving exchange with him where she would chastise him with so that exchange of Krishna's feeling is found, and feelings of Krishna is found in the Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. That Mother Yasoda is treating Krishna as very insignificant. He's my child. If I don't protect him, he'll die. Because if she was thinking, here's God, all she could do would be stand before him with folded hands. She couldn't offer her that loving, intimate service. And therefore, due to this love, Krishna was very much obliged to Yasoda. So But, in general, okay, God is so great, so good. He's hearing that, Krishna's hearing that. But when Mother Yasoda comes and chastises him, he likes it very much, that loving exchange. So Krishna, he was also happened to be the nephew of Kunti. Kunti was Krishna's father's sister. But because she was a devotee, she knew Krishna also, although he's within the heart, he's just playing the part of my nephew. But she knew he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She knew that. You're Ishwara, you're the controller. But what kind of controller? There are many, many. There's food controllers, there's house controllers, but Krishna's not that kind of controller. He's Prakriti Param. He is controller, but his position is beyond this material world. This Prakriti means the material world, and Prakriti Param, beyond this material world. So that means that the controllers within the material world, they are only there, they're produced at a certain date, and they'll be finished at a certain date. Just like a president, he's a controller of the country, but at a certain time, he's given that power until a certain date, and then it will be finished. So Krishna is not that kind of limited controller, where his controlling power begins at a certain date and finishes at a certain date. No, Krishna is eternally always the supreme controller. So therefore, this Prakriti Param, supreme controller, he's a controller of the material nature. All of us, we have some controlling power, but not very much. So as our life begins and ends, everything in this material world has a beginning and end, except Krishna, the controlling power. He is not like that. Okay, so I see it's getting a little late here. So therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it said, Devi Hiesha Gunamayi Mamadmaya Durakchaya. You cannot surpass the stringent laws of material nature. We can't. This is our struggle for existence. And it's going on, life after life, any life, human life, animal life, trees, aquatics, birds, struggle is there. There must always be anxiety because we've accepted this material body. And that means we're in the material world. But we can see God. We can talk with God. And if we go back home, back to Godhead, why should we lose this opportunity? This is the opportunity given to the human form of life that we can see God, we can talk with God, we can go back home to Godhead. Everything is possible. And this is made possible through the practice of Krishna consciousness. And this is the meaning of the Krishna consciousness movement. Everyone is trying to become perfect, but perfection means when one can see God within and without. That is perfection. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Mother, for the wonderful pastimes of the Lord. Narrations are so heartwarming to hear them from you and some of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes also. I'm particularly fascinated by the sharing of the Mother Janaki's chastisement of Srila Prabhupada. It's so sweet to hear. Thank you very much. So we have two questions. Is Grace Sadev Prabhu ask a question? So Sadev Prabhu, please kindly unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hare Krishna, Mother Malati.
Haribol.
Thank you so much for blessing our platform every now and then. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me every now and then. All of you are such great souls, and you've been taught by such a great soul. So even though I'm moving my mouth, I'm actually here for your association.
Hare Krishna. My first question, do you have plans of holding Ratha Yatra this year? I don't think so.
Yeah, we do. We are. Yeah. July
beautiful.
17th. July 17th.
Okay, okay. I will make it this time.
But it'll be in Wheeling. The city has agreed. Again, last year we had Rath Yatra. We had one here in New Vrindavan.
Okay.
But what we did is we had a Rath cart that was built on the back of a truck. And
Okay.
then just like in the first Rath Yatra, so the Dd's
Okay.
were there, but it was really decorated nicely. And then we started at the big barn down at far end of the New Vrindavan, and we started there, and all the people in that area came at Kirtan and Prasad, and then we drove further to the next place and stopped, and people came, Kirtan and Prasad, and we kept going way to the far end of New Vrindavan, which is known as Talavan.
Yes.
And we went there, Kirtan, Prasad. It was so wonderful. And the Lord was coming to see his devotees, because at that point in time, we couldn't have people too much together, So we weren't walking behind the cart. Everybody was in their cars. There was many,
Oh,
many cars following the Rath
okay.
Yatra cart. It was really wonderful. It was so personal. Just like I'm talking here in this little talk today about the personality of Godhead. Means the Lord's a person, right? So we were following, all of us persons were following that supreme person.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Mother, you were talking about Mother Janaki, like scolding Srila Prabhupada. We just read that yesterday. In Gita Nagri here, we read from Srila Prabhupada's Lamrita on Sundays. And it
Yes.
was so interesting how Mother Janaki was scolding Srila Prabhupada that you are tasting whipped cream. And Srila Prabhupada says, what's the name? She said, whipped cream. He says, no, this is yogurt. And Mother Janaki said, no, Srila Prabhupada, this is whipped cream. And so he tasted it and he says, oh, this tastes good. And then Mother Janaki was looking at Srila Prabhupada and says, Srila Prabhupada, why are you eating in Radharani's kitchen? it's so funny and interesting at the same time. But my question is, how were you the first devotees of Srila Prabhupada? Most of you didn't know anything about spiritual life, like guru and disciple relationship, but you were able to enact that role as guru-disciple relationship so beautifully, up to the point that those of us who are like second generation, it's much easier for us because we see you do it. And so it's easier for us to just know what to do, what not to do. Yet, it's very difficult for most of us to do it. So my question is, how were you able to do it for the first time when you didn't even have anybody to look up to? Hare Krishna.
Yeah, we didn't have anyone, but we had Srila Prabhupada. It was by his example and by his mercy only that we were able to somehow or other follow and accept this beautiful platform of Krishna conscious practices. And of course, it took time to develop. We didn't just, overnight flip a switch and suddenly the lights came on. It took a lot of time to develop, and it's still developing, because we understand that somehow or other in a previous life we had been connected. Prabhupada told us this, that in a previous birth we'd been connected with Lord Chaitanya's movement, but we didn't finish our business. That was his words. We didn't finish our business. So now we have the opportunity again to finish the business. And what does that mean? It means to go back home, back to Godhead. And still, just as we had previous births, we have all the previous imprints of all the previous. It means, that just like we do the samskara, it's an imprint to help us remember the Supreme Lord. Everything we do that creates an imprint on the mind, on the consciousness. So if we behave in a proper manner, as is described, for example, in the Varnashram system, where everybody has a particular role to play and the roles are carefully defined. And of course, nowadays we don't like to be restricted by definitions, but those definitions are there, just like the line on the center of the road or on the side of the road are there to keep us on the road. So in the same way, these definitions of how to live our life, for example, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex, the basic four principles, they're there to bring us to the platform of human life. Because other words, in Prabhupada's own words, without coming to the platform of human life, we are simply polished cats and dogs. We have two legs, two arms, etc., but our behavior is on par with animal life. So the human life means that we have the ability and the opportunity to develop God consciousness. And this is the express purpose of human life. And we saw in Srila Prabhupada a perfected person. And he gave us the hope and courage that if we make this endeavor, we too can enter into this perfection, which is knowing God. And over the decades, I have seen how many God brothers and God sisters who are so sincere and so determined and so dedicated that by entering into this process, they, in such a willing manner, they became purified. And at their time of death, we could understand that they had gone back home, back to Godhead. So it was really by Srila Prabhupada's presence that we were able to connect ourselves with this wonderful practice of Krishna consciousness. And in the same way, I feel it's so important to know about Srila Prabhupada, who he is, what he is, and because not, some people say they speak in past tense, who he was, not was, is. His presence is still the very thing that gives life to the Krishna consciousness movement. So it's very good that you're studying Lilamrita to know more about Prabhupada, understand more about Prabhupada, because Prabhupada is always directly connected with Krishna. Even the books that he has so kindly left behind for our benefit are a result of his direct connection with Krishna. Because he told us when he would sit down to write, Krishna would dictate into his ear. And he simply was hearing Krishna and writing what Krishna was telling him. This is amazing.
Okay, thank you very much, Mother, for that wonderful answer. I have a question in relation to something Sadhu Prabhu was asking. While you're giving a lecture, you narrating so many pastimes of Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. You are narrating pastimes of Krishna, his wonderful activities, opening his mouth, Mother Yasoda, and Mr. Prabhupada. And when we hear these pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, we feel so much of joy. Naturally, unconsciously, we just feel so satisfied, so blissful in the heart. And my question is, I'm remembering Srila Prabhupada in the early days, this slogan, stay high forever. Having been in devotional service for so many years, why is it that we cannot remain in this consciousness of remembering Srila Prabhupada, Lord Krishna's pastimes, and not forget at any time, even while we're in devotional service? Because sometimes we find out that sometimes we remember these pastimes while we're in the class, while normally we leave the class or we're doing some other engagement, we seem to forget them. And how do we keep them in focus?
Yeah. Well, Krishna gives us memory. He gives us forgetfulness. It's up to us which one we'll take advantage of. And a short answer why we don't remain fully fixed in Krishna consciousness is because we're still not fully determined. We still have some interest in the shadow. The shadow means the material energy. So as long as we have that interest, by interest, I'm being very specific. like we may have to deal with material energy, like we have a job or something outside, whatever. But that's one thing. But interest means I have some inclination in that direction. And it's that inclination and interest in the material energy for not for Krishna, but for my own self, for my sense gratification that captures us and keeps us flickering back and forth, back and forth. Krishna, Maya, Krishna, Maya. Um, One day I was in Jaipur at Radha Govind Dev's temple, and this is just such a beautiful place to be. And the whole town will come out, like for Mangal Arti, people are literally running to get there before the curtains open to see the beautiful face of Govinda. And how many of us run to Mangal Arti, So the whole town running to Mangal Arti. I was there one day, Mangal Arti, and there was a lady. The ladies have one side, the men on the other. It's a nice arrangement. So I'm on the ladies' side. Next to me, right by me, was a younger lady, mother. She had her little baby with her, and she was getting up on her toes to see Govinda, and then she'd look at the baby, and then she'd look at Govinda, and then she'd look at the baby. It's like, and I was appreciating her determination to be there at 4:30 in the morning, and I was appreciating her attraction for Govinda, but I was seeing how baby Govinda, it was like that pull is always there, the pull of the material energy. And even our families, we ultimately have to give up that pull to our families if we want to become fully purified and eligible to be in the presence of the Lord 100% of the time. So it's up to our decision, it's up to our determination to do this.
Thank you very much. I do not see any hands up again. So meaning that Sadi Prabhu's hand is up again. So I think I'll have to give him the opportunity. There's no other question. So Sadi Prabhu, please can you unmute and ask a question?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Mother. Recently, I watched a couple of videos on YouTube where other senior devotees were discussing the topic Srila Prabhupada, our preeminent guru, which I think is a very important topic to be discussed.
Yeah.
Because one fear and concern I've been having and continue to have is that if we do not take very close attention to what we do, then some few years to come, ISKCON might not be the same as we know it today. And that is, we are individuals and we all have our preferences. And so somebody may say, I don't want to do this way, I don't want to do that way, but it becomes the rule. And I'm trying to point out that cow protection is very paramount to our devotional service. We need milk for so many things. Yeah. And I have heard that even some of the leadership in the ISKCON cow protection ministry, as it stands today, do not ask devotees to take milk that is not from like devotees Goshala. Even if you took like organic milk, they considered that it to be offensive milk. So my question is,
because
okay.
Well, I just wanted to mention, organic or inorganic, the same result will be there when the cow, when it's coming from an industrial dairy. So the same thing will happen, organic eating cow or not organic eating cow. When the cow ceases to fulfill a certain level of production, then they're of no value anymore to these people. So, it's a very tragic aspect of our modern so-called culture, that we have no we don't care for the mothers, and the cow is our mother. So go ahead with your question.
So, I think it's very good idea that we only take milk from our own cows because of the way we treat them. But if a devotee is in a situation whereby he will not have access to such type of milk,
Yeah.
is it okay to use whatever is available, especially like if you go to the grocery stores, at least you'll find some that they clearly indicate. You wouldn't know how true it is, but they clearly indicated that they do not use these artificial things in the milk production. They do not feed the cows with these artificial things. But my question is it okay for a devotee who has no access to like Vaishnav milk to take such milk?
That is up to your heart, but I'm going to say one thing, because at least if you're a father or a mother, it's your duty to see that your child gets cow's milk. There's no way around this. So do whatever you can if you have access to, now they call it Himsa milk. It's a new category of milk. It means milk from protected cows. Obviously, that is preferable. But it's a matter, if you want your children to survive in life and have a fighting chance to become God conscious, then the finer tissues of the brain need to be developed. Even Karmi sciences recognize that milk, and only cow's milk, will do this. I've read these reports. So it's a form of violence not to give cow's milk to your children. And if that means having to use the milk from unprotected cows, then do it. Feel sorry about it, but do it.
Thank you.
As adults, it's not as vital, but it is vital for the children. And also for yajna, how are you going to, obviously it's almost kind of crazy to think of offering cow products in a yajna to satisfy Vishu, and the cow is, going to eventually be slaughtered. But at the same time, Krishna, in Prabhupada's word, wants his milk. Arjuna didn't want to fight. He gave these wonderful examples. When I first heard Arjuna saying why he didn't want to fight, I was on his side. But that side was out of mundane morality. And when Krishna gave his word, I want you to fight, and Arjuna accepted Krishna's words and fought, that fighting was glorious. Now, the best thing that we can do is somehow or other, collectively within our different communities, even within the city, find some situation on the outside where you can perhaps have a cow that's cared for by a person who may or may not be a devotee. Better to be a devotee, but somehow have your own cow for your own needs. But if you can't even do that, then still the milk has to be there. It's what I call an Arjuna moment. It's like, this milk is, some people call it blood milk, contaminated because it's coming from a commercial dairy. But Krishna says he wants his milk. It doesn't, we have to do our best. Somehow we can't ignore this situation. And we must do our best to try to rectify so that we can have, at least within our communities, protected milk from protected cows. But if it's not possible, then with heavy hearts, we'll accept the milk from a cow and we'll offer that to Krishna. And by that offering to Krishna, some good will come for that creature. Some people like to argue that point, but that point was clearly made by Prabhupada himself when in the late 60s, we found out they were putting fish oil in the milk. They don't do it now. They use artificial, but they were actually, better watch out. They do put fish oil in some organic milk. So you got to read your labels really good and find, when they talk about vitamin D, find out the source. So they were putting the vitamin D in the milk to provide, in the form of fish oil. And we found out, and we asked Prabhupada what to do. And Prabhupada just kind of, his head went a little down, and he goes, what can we do? Krishna wants his milk. Just like Krishna wanted Arjuna to fight. So your Gita Nagari is not really, I don't think, hopefully it's not a problem for you to get milk from protected cows. But that's not the case everywhere. So make the endeavor to rectify the situation. But in the meantime, if you're a parent, please do not withhold cow's milk from your children, especially young children. That's my humble request.
Thank you so much, Mother. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
So,
Krishna.
I think we'll draw the curtain here because there are no more questions. And we want to appreciate you once again for the kind association you're giving to us. We are very enlivening and enlightening when we have the opportunity to have this darshan. Thanks to COVID-19, we have this opportunity to see you more frequently and hear from you. So on this note, I'll request all of the devotees to please kindly unmute. Let us appreciate Mother by loudly chanting Hare Krishna mantra.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Thank you
My
so much.
obeisances again to all of you. All glories to Srila
Vancha
Prabhupada.
kalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyeva patitanam pavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
namo
Namo
namaha.
Namaha. Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay, thank you all devotees. Hare Krishna. So look